Hello, everyone, and welcome to Institute of Global Professional, the leading online skills institute on the world. It's our pleasure to welcome you here in our 272nd International Free Webinar Training. My name is Juliet De La Torre from City of Bogo Science and Arts Academy, Philippines. Thank you all for finding time and visiting today's webinar, and we hope you will always stay with us till the end. You will receive a certificate right after our live streaming, a quiz competition certificate for those who are top 10 in the quiz competition. And we are hoping that everyone will be associated with IGP as a global member. Continue to attend all of our webinars, check in IGP, and recommend IGP to your friends and community. I am sure you will learn from the various webinars that we have. At any time, you can like and comment on our webinar, and don't forget to tag, share, and mention your friends during friends and community. We believe that power is gained by sharing knowledge rather than accumulating it. Before we get started, let us learn more about IGP. Institute of Global Professionals is an educational institution that provides social work. We believe that improving skills is not effective just by receiving formal training. That is why we provide effective training and advice to create talented generations around the world. The IGP is a leading online institution for skills development with thousands of learners around the world. We organize our webinar training, offline and online courses by best and trained speakers, coaches from all over the world to create the best learning platform for all of you. We hope that everyone will help you grow personally and professionally, and we hope you will accompany us in this long journey. Let me remind you again, don't forget to share, tag, and comment your friends. We get better and encourage everyone to provide quality services. Don't forget again to tag with your friends. So at this moment, I would like to introduce our today's webinar session, Research Trend and Psychoanalytic Study of Women Literature and Speaker. And we had two speakers from India and Bhutan, Dr. Shitra from and Dr. Viva Bhutta from India. So without further ado, once again, let's welcome our first speaker, Dr. Viva Bhatt from India. Let's give her a resounding round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you, Juliet, for that warm
Hello,
welcome.
ma'am.
Am I
Welcome to
audible?
IGP.
Yep, thank
Please
you. Am I
introduce
audible?
yourself, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Um, I am Dr. Vibha Booth, Assistant Professor, Janar Vyas University, Jodhpur, India. And I have been an active researcher, a voracious reader, and I'm a writer as well. I've been published extensively all over the globe. And I have around 80 publications, national, international conferences, webinars, journals, everything. And I have a 17-year-old experience in academics, and now here I am representing India. So, Juliet, do I have the permission to start?
Yes, ma'am, you can start, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm sharing my screen. Is my PPT visible?
Ma'am Juliet, please unmute your microphone.
Hello, hello. Sorry. Please make it at presentation mode, ma'am.
Is my screen visible, Juliet?
Yes, ma'am. It's visible.
The
Okay,
entire
that's it,
screen?
ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So, the title of my presentation is, as on the screen, Women Perceived Through the Theory of Psychoanalysis in Literature. Now, to all the learners out there, let us see the structure of the presentation. First, I'm going to discuss about psychoanalysis. Then, I have chosen a couple of books from Indian English literature. Now, the motive of choosing these books from Indian English literature is to represent India, one thing. Second, and to let the world know that India, as in when we are introducing ourselves on this international platform, there is a lot of content, there is a lot of substance, there is a lot of approach that holds water in Indian context as well. So friends, my motive of choosing Indian English literature is this. So let me start now with my presentation. Now, what is psychoanalysis? It is a theory by Austrian neurologist Sigmund Freud, and it actually declines the therapeutic arena and it moves on to the CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, it was designed to treat depression, but then it moved to different zones and the research made it do so. And it came out that it was made to sort many mental conditions later on. And so it came to literature as well. And let's see why literature. I mean, why it came to being a theory or being a study that belonged to a neurologist and he used it to treat an illness. How did it come to literature? Why literature? So now, since literature is entwined with psyche, the behavioral aspect of different characters, the behavioral aspect of, we actually study behavioral science. So the concept or the form and the method, it's influential by psychoanalysis. Now the author or the character becomes the object of the psychoanalytical criticism. So when we are studying on that character, we have to use a couple of theories. So Sigmund Freud, in his interpretation of dreams, which was published in 1899, he spoke about this theory and he wrote extensively about this approach of his. Now, what is the structure actually of this psychoanalytical theory by Sigmund Freud? Now, he talks about, this is just an overview since it's a multidisciplinary thing that we are going about. So I'm not going to delve deeper into the theory of it, the extensive approach to the theory, but still just a skimming through is required. So he talks about three parts in this theory, that's id, ego, and superego. Now, since the screen explains itself, that there are whenever there's a child and he speaks about something that he just wants to have an ice cream or something. So the instinctual desire of the child, that's id, and he goes by it because he just can stomp his feet and just talk about that he just really wants the thing, and it's kind of an uncontrollable instinctual desire. Now, then comes the ego. Now, ego, it comes in between, it mediates between the id and the super ego, wherein super ego is the ethical component. It tells you what should be done at this particular moment, and it is a moral science based approach. So it is a super ego, as in this particular thing that I have created. Like, I made a study from this epic thing, Indian epics, Mahabharata and Ramayana, and I'm sure you might be knowing about it. Now the id is exemplified by Duryodhan and Shakuni, because they are going by their instinctual desire and they are not providing any kind of logical reasoning to what they want actually and what is right. So they are dominated by id, something very childlike, something very stubborn, something very inexplicable as to why this should be done. When a child behaves in this fashion, that we don't have a why of it, we just can say that the child wants this. where why these questions don't matter at all with the child. So Duryodhan and Shakuni are dominated by the id aspect because they go by their instincts. If they want the throne, they want it by any means, by hook or by crook, they're going to have it. The ego thing, which is mediating between, which is telling you that what should be done, or you cannot have this approach, you cannot have the throne right now for Duryodhan because of these many reasons. So Bhishma is kind of a character who's kind of negotiating between the super ego and the id. Now, Krishna, Lord Krishna, he becomes the super ego because of the moral values, the ethics, what should be done. Everybody would go and seek the refuge of his advice in Mahabharata. So now, when id is the horse, the ego becomes the horse rider. When id is the horse and ego is the horse rider, the super ego becomes the cloud of it and would give the entire ambience for them to thrive on. Now, why should id thrive? Because even that is necessary in our characters. Now we come to, we since we have connected id to the characters of the epics, so we are going to connect this particular approach to literature as well in my upcoming PowerPoint presentations. Now, why are we doing this? First, the question is this. Now, whenever there is an ego which functions on the conscious or the unconscious, I'm coming to this aspect in my upcoming research. Now, the ego kind of brings a unanimity between the id and the superego. Okay, we will come to this in the next slide. And before that, I'd like to discuss some characters from Ramayana. Id, Kekai, Manthara, and Ravan from the Ramayana. Now they go by their instinctual desires, whatever they want. Yes, I have to have. If Ravan took away Sita, and he has to get married to that lady, so he is going to do that without anybody stopping him, and he doesn't want anybody to stop him either. So he is carried by his instinctual desire of possessing Sita. Now, Kekai has been instigated by Manthara in Ramayana. So, when Manthara instigates Kekai, she also behaves through that id approach of hers, which is again instinctual desire of her son becoming the taking over the throne. Despite the fact that Ram was the elder one, Bharat should be given the throne. This was Kekai's id, the stubbornness, the approach that she kind of she was taken by that approach. Now the ego thing, which again mediates between the superego and id, Hanuman and Lakshman, they kind of just tell you that this shouldn't be done right now. It cannot be done right now. And the super ego thing, Ram, what should be done? Actually, according to the moral principles, according to the value system, according to what is right, Sita and Bharat. Even Bharat goes to, he self exiles himself. Why? Because he thinks that this is not right, what's happening. So the moral science aspect becomes the super ego. Now, this picture explains everything in itself. The id says that I need to eat right this second. The child, I'm hungry, I have to eat. Beat anything. I have to just eat and go by it. The ego says that no, you cannot have, because probably you are in a meeting, probably you are in a classroom, probably you are being watched by somebody wherein you should not be eating. It's not the decorum, it's not the right thing, it's not the protocol. It shouldn't be done in this fashion. Whichever thing, this is just an example for food or something. And then the superego says, becomes a judge, as in the picture. It says that it's not right while you are in the meeting, and you should not be eating in the middle of the meeting. So you should not be eating in middle of the class. You will have a recess or an interval for the same. So this pic explains it all, the theory, the overview of the theory. Herein I'm talking about a disciple of Sigmund Freud, who talked about an extensive approach in this particular theory. Now, as for the examples in Freud's theory, the Lord of Flies, William Golding thing, we have lots of examples. Jack becomes the id, Ralph becomes the ego, Piggy becomes the superego. And in Hamlet by Shakespeare, there is a quote, I quote, rank sweel of an enseamed bed. The ghost says, I quote, do not forget the visitations is but to whet thy almost blunted purpose, unquote. And in Act 5, Gertrude dies because of the id part again. In fact, on the lighter side of it, Tom and Jerry, Tom goes by the id aspect. So these are some examples. And there was a contradiction between Carl Jung, the disciple of Sigmund Freud, and Sigmund Freud. So the extensive version of the theory comes. Now, Jake Lankin gives Lankinian theory. He says that child is in unconscious state. And the mirror stage, he talks about the mirror stage, he talks about the object relational theory. So now the contradiction arises with the Lankinian theory. The next one, the fluid disciple thing, when Carl Jung entered a dispute with him regarding the theory, he studies the theory as in a couple of parts. The first part is the study of the archetypes. Now, when something old is impacting the unconscious idea, say some inherited things, some behavioral aspect, some symbol, some motive, these are archetypal things. Some classical story, for instance, let's go by the Cinderella story. Is it that an archetypal thing? Yes, of course it is, because it talks about Cinderella being a very beautiful woman, and where she marries a prince. And this kind of, I mean, later on it was modified to a very large extent, so many modifications have come over, but the original story remains the same. So that is the archetype, that is the thing that is to be mentioned over here. The original aspect, the theory, or as in I spoke about Ramayana and Mahabharata, the epics, the Indian epics. Now, some behavior that establishes before the consciousness develops and continues after the consciousness develops is known as collective unconscious. Now, this was also studied by Carl Jung, and he speaks about the collective unconscious as well in this fashion. Now, the stories, the epics, the fairy tales. Now, he speaks about one more aspect, that is the inherited shape of the human mind. The ego represents the conscious mind, and so on. So when the theory speaks about the composition of the brain, the collective unconscious, the personal unconscious, there it was again further on extended to what kind of personality or what kind of person is created in furthermore development of the in furthermore research that was conducted by Carl Jung following his theoretical ideas. He says that there are people who have the traits of king, priest, sage, scholar, warrior, artisan, server, and everybody has these traits in quite a proportion. Now, how do you decide that a person is going to become a king or a server? Which trait is dominant? Which trait works more on you? It controls the entire persona. It controls the entire, you can say, of the person's mentality or the person's thought process. Now, the archetypal qualities, the collective unconscious. Now, whatever we are collecting unconsciously is the collective unconscious in the layman thing. Whatever we are groomed into. Say, for instance, when we were a child, there was an unconscious mind that was working. We are collecting things, we are collecting so many things. Stories were just an example. We were collecting habits, we were collecting so many things even without knowing. So that is the unconscious mind that works over here. So the collective unconscious mind, it contributes to the personality formation unconsciously, but at the same time these factors also work on a person's making in on a person's being. So now the dominant factor in this particular approach, the king, priest, sage, scholar thing, that makes us, whichever factor dominates. Say for instance, the priest factor dominates, and everybody knows what are the qualities of a priest. So when the factors of a priest dominate, we know that the person is going to become a priest because he may be, say, very kind, very humble, soft spoken, he may be a devotee of God, and so on. So these are the qualities that if those qualities dominate in a person, is going to become a priest. Now there are certain archetypes, like, let's get back to the literature thing again. There are a couple of archetypes that I'm going to speak. Now, it isn't that always an object is an archetype, or some symbolic thing is an archetype. There are certain things in literature which have come up as archetype. That's as in the rape trauma thing in Apollo Daphne story in Kamala Das from India. Now, the patriarchy ruling on the society is again a recurrent archetype in Shashi Deshpande, Anita Desai, Savitribai Phule, Amrita Pritam, Kamla Markande, Mahashweta Devi, Krishna Sopti, Chitra Banerjee, Kavita Kane, Baby Kamble, Urmila Pawar, Meena Kandaswamy, and of course Bharti Mukherjee. These are Indian writers, and there are certain archetypes which come on a recurrent basis, and you know that these are archetypes and these are being referred to. Poverty archetype, not to forget, in tribal women literature, Dalit women, what we call in India. The next one is quest for identity archetype in The Color Purple by Alice Walker, Toni Morrison's Beloved, Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God, and a couple of archetype more that I have to mention over here. Now, again, lack of education archetype in Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf, the lack of education, why women were denied a room of one's own. So that archetype keeps on coming in literature. Slavery archetype, again, in African American literature, so many books. Beloved, Alice Walker, Zora Neale Hurston, Their Eyes Were Watching, Women of Brewster Place by Gloria Naylor. Now, disturbed marriage, remarriage, child marriage, even these are the archetypes. Again, they recurrently come in literature in Shashi Deshpande, as I'm going to speak about shortly. Sudha Murthy again. In Indian literature, we have those Sita and Savitri archetypes. Women are supposed to become like Sita. They're supposed to become like Savitri, the mother figure archetype. Even Chitra Banerjee Devakruni speaks about it in her literature. Bharti Mukherjee's wife speaks a lot about these archetypes, the mother figure, the Sita Savitri archetype, ideal female body archetypes. Because earlier, while doing my research, I came out to know that in the Miss World context, they had a measurement. Even now they have, but then it's kind of a flexible approach now. So now the vital statistics archetype, which used to come recurrently in literature as well, the Victorian clothing and the Victorian literature projecting this ideal body archetype is the best example that suits here. I mean, so many archetypes. Let's come on to the text that I've chosen for my research. It's Fire on the Mountain, published in 1977 by Anita Desai. Now, when we talk about this particular novel, the central characters, there are three characters as visible on the screen. They are victims of norms scripted by the society. The conflict of Anita Desai's characters arises from their inability to enact the role that the society demands. Now they are fed up with the act of performing different roles. These women try to abscond from the bonds of relations and the society in order to search their lost identity. I spoke about the lost identity archetype. In this quest for their identity, the repressed fire bounces back in a seemingly redoubled power, which destroys as well as creates. Symbol fire that is visible on the screen. Now, these archetypes and motives and symbols would be coming recurrently in our text. Now, Nanda Kaul, the protagonist, is sketched to be an old woman who wishes not to be disturbed by anyone from outside, because the world that she has created for herself, she's a kind of a recluse person. She wants to stay in her own cocoon. That's Carignano. Now she is isolated from the ceremonious actions of the past, She has created a world of her own, and she has, and kind of a comfort zone, and she wouldn't want to leave that comfort zone for all that matter. Now she was once the vice chancellor's wife, and she used to provide for him and to show people, and she was always a servile uh, woman, a wife, and a dedicated person. But her existence was kind of meaningless and unsatisfying at the same to her, because her husband was having an affair with Miss David, and she knew all about that affair. But then she became a decorative item, and she became a kind of a person who was not there, despite the fact that she used to work mechanically for the house. Now, she was kind of very glad to leave everything after her husband's death. She felt free from the clutches of relations and the house she was never attached to. Now, throughout the novel, we see that whenever Nanda mentions the house she lived in earlier, she always termed it as the vice chancellor's house. This implies that Nanda had never felt any belongingness to that house. Raka is the great granddaughter of Nanda Kaul. As seen by Nanda, Raka is a part of nature, and natural habitat is the ravine, and whose behavior is described as in animal imagery. Now, when she first meets Raka, when Nanda first meets Raka, she compares her to dark cricket and a mosquito. Now that comparison is a kind of weird, but then ultimately when they reach to a rapport, reach to a point where they can agree with each other. Now that's a kind of a difficult thing, because Nanda is a loner. She wants to stay alone, and Ila, for Ila, Nanda is a friend, and she makes the narrative. And for the first time, someone she thinks that Nanda may be having a great life because she has a home, and she is. The grass is always greener on the other side, and she thinks that Nanda is having a great life. But then she is a victim of a rape. Now, rape is again a stereotypical archetype over here. Now, she wanted to move away from the shackles of a child marriage, Ila, and ultimately, what happens is that she is raped brutally, and she dies. And again, Nanda is forced to think about the death of Ila, and it shatters her tremendously. So these are the women, and here the archetypal motifs that I have used are fire. So fire traditionally symbolizes destruction and purification as well at the same time, both of which Raka seeks in setting fire to the mountain. Fire will burn away the traumas and the terrors of the patriarchal world in which Raka and Nanda live, exorcise the demons of Raka's past, and cleanse the world of the grotesque partygoers from the club who represent excess and abuse. The burnt house is the second symbol that I am using over here for my research. Now, the burnt house on the hill is symbolic of Raka and what has happened to her, which is why it draws her in so inexorably. The house is supposed to be a place of security and succor, but for Raka, it was a madhouse of abuse, fear, and impotence. The house being burnt shows that Raka's devastated psyche, but also the fact that fire can destroy and purify exactly at the same time, and what Raka will do to herself at the end of the book. Now, the next motive that I'm using over here is the sea. Now, the sea is the key motive here, as in the archetypal approach as well. The mountains are often compared with sea, and lights in those villages are compared to ships, um, speaking about the image thing as an archetypal approach. The imagery of sea animals is often used to describe people like Nanda, said to hook like Raka, a fish which strengthens and loosens. The frequent evocation of waves, ships, and being shipwrecked strengthen the associations of Carignano with as isolation and wilderness. The next motif is silence. Silence is again a recurrent motif in Indian English literature. In Anita Desai's That Long Silence, She speaks about a woman, Jaya, being silent, say forever, probably, till she breaks her silence in the end, of course. Now, silence throughout this text, Nanda Kaul and Raka often remain silent. Nanda Kaul keeps her thoughts to herself, does not finish, ending up speaking about them, and objects to loudness of others. Raka also refuses to talk much, keeping her interior closed off throughout the book. Iladas, though, refuses to be silent and is eventually killed for it. The motive of silence is I spoke about it earlier as well, that it occurs in so many characters, and it gives actually a thrust to the characterial graph of women in Indian English literature, because they have the forces that work against them, that is patriarchy. Now these three characters who are a victim of patriarchy in different ways. Now, Nanda has spent her life in a loveless but not a childless life, of course. Her husband loved a different woman, but that didn't stop him from expecting Nanda Kaul to bear and raise the children and run his household. Raka regularly witnessed the abuse of her mother by her father and was thus traumatized in her childhood. Ila was left poverty stricken, and her brothers squandered all her family money. She is later raped and killed after she protests a child marriage. All these women are trying a way, they are trying to find a way to live. So now the patriarchy, the patriarchal pressure is working upon these relationships, these women. And so the next social paradigm that I've used is nature. Now nature, you can say nature has so many meanings. It is again a motive of an archetypal approach. It has got so many, you can say, the way you feel from your heart, you perceive nature in that fashion. But here the aspects of natural world describe the characters and provide context for what they are experiencing. For example, the women are compared to birds. Raka means moon, and Raka is fascinated by fire, dust, and wilderness. The next motive is memory. Now, memory again means remembering your past. It can be ameliorative, as it is for Iladas, who recalls her salad days at the university, but it can also be terrible, as it is for Nanda and Raka. Now, the next one is exile. Nanda is happy to escape her former life of toil, self abnegation, and mute acceptance of her role as a wife and mother. At Carignano, she convinces herself that this is exactly what she wanted: exile, solitude, and independence. Now, the next one is mother. Mother means unconditional love. Again, a motive, as I spoke about in my archetypal motives as well. Now, for Iladas, first, Iladas is not a mother and is thus perceived to be a distasteful spinster. When she does engage in nurturing role as a social worker, she is punished for it. This reveals that even when acting in a motherly capacity, the violent patriarchal system can still see fit to it as it pleases. Now, second, Raka's mother, Tara, has been rendered weak, impotent, and mentally and physically ravaged by her husband. So she cannot act as a strong mother to Raka. Third, Nanda Kaul is a mother who does not really enjoy being one. Children were exhausting and unsatisfying to her, and she only wished to live her own life on her own terms. All of these examples suggest that motherhood is not a paradise for all of them, not perhaps a natural role, nor even something that offers safety and solace, as the archetypal motive speaks that motherhood is unconditional love. The second approach to I'm just moving on since there is a paucity of time. Sudha Murthy, I've chosen two books of Sudha Murthy. One is House of Cards, published in 2013. The protagonist is Mridula, who's young and enthusiastic woman, hails from a village in Karnataka. She meets Sanjay, falls in love with him, and gets married and settles down in Bangalore. Now, she feels disappointed looking at the selfish materialistic world. Now, these protagonists, whether we talk of Nanda or Mridula, they have some kind of id dominating. We're not saying that they're childlike or behaving in a stubborn way, but they have their own point of views. They have something that dominates the entire thought process. Okay, we can say that Mridula is, you can say, is dominated by ego, or we can say that Nanda is dominated by id of being a secluded person, of living alone. Since we are social animals, we can call that an id. Maybe depends upon the personal point of view. Now, let's get to the text, the House of Cards. Now, materialistic dimensions have differentiated our values, demeaning our family ties. True love, understanding, and patience are these are the core values to keep any relationship meaningful. Now, the never ending ambition, materialism, and the corrupt practices that gain momentum are disapproved by Mridula, the central character of the book. The problem actually, it's rooted in selfishness, in which we see in the character of Sanjay from the book. The pain and agony which is borne by Mridula are evident from the paragraphs that I've from the quotation that I've taken from the book. I quote: tears rolled down Mridula's cheeks. She thought, how did I live with Sanjay for such a long time? Today, he's given me money and position in the society, but he doesn't share my sorrows. I've held his hands and walked next to him on the thorny path to success. When a girl gets married, the extent of her happiness depends upon the husband's commitment and communication with her. A few kind words, a little appreciation, and small gifts like flowers can make a girl feel special. But Sanjay just wanted to show that he was the boss. Unquote. These lines are from the book House of Cards. So now these lines speak volume for what was going inside her. What was the perspective of the central character, Mridula? The next book that I've chosen for my research is Gently Falls the Buckle Up, published in 2008. Now, this is an emphatic book by Sudha Murthy. The book revolves around two characters, Srimati and Shrikant. They are neighbors. Their homes are surrounded by a bakula tree. Now, the bakula tree is symbolic over here. Two families hate each other. In spite of the family disagreement, they fall in love and get married. Srimati sacrifices a lot, and Shrikant progresses in life professionally to the largest of extents. But his greed for power and success blinds his thinking. He ignores her. She takes the decision to depart from him once and for all to follow her vision. The Bakula flowers are the attachments to her love letters, indicating that the fragrance of their love will never vanish. They get married. Shrikant was career oriented and dedicated. He joins an IT company and climbs the corporate ladder rapidly and gains success. Leaving behind Srimati and her academic aspirations, Srimati fulfills her duties as an obedient wife all through her prime days. She gradually realizes the emptiness in her. The story concludes with Srimati leaving the house to follow her vision. Now, it is a story of a marriage that loses its charm because of the greed of the husband. Now, when we talk about the role of a woman in Indian context, especially, it's just to upkeep the family. There is no vision in the context of the career for the woman. There is no ambitiousness for the woman thing. She is totally dedicated. She has to be a family thing. She has to take care of all the responsibilities. Now, let us talk about some historical background of women in India. The role of women in India from the colonial period seems to be dependent on their men. The tradition cowed down their position just to continue the family line. They're denied from grabbing the opportunities of education and refinement. They have been excluded from social and political activities, though not yet, I mean, not now. They have been taken to a limbo of oblivion in literature because the society was such. So now I continue. They are ignorant of their basic rights as an individual because of illiteracy and ignorance. Except a few women of the nobility, the life of general women is not worth living. Now, the social evils of rights from sati, devdasi system, parda system, child marriage, to infanticide, dowry death. These are some of the evils that have been caused to trim down the position of women in Indian society. Now, after independence, the Indian Constitution has enshrined many rights to women. Indian government has provided equal educational opportunities for women ever since it has introduced many schemes to empower women in many sectors. Now let's come to the texting. Now these are a couple of societal paradigms that I have spoken about in my paper. The gender-based violence is spoken about the entire world. All the feminism waves that we've already read speak about gender-based violence to the largest extent: the physical, material, emotional, psychological, social, all kind of violence. These come under when a man or the patriarchy does to the woman, it comes under the list of the gender-based violence. Now, when we talk about the concept of money, now money is also an archetype because its implications are so many, but it is just one thing that affects so many. It can be life giver, life saver, it can be pride, it can be arrogance, and it can have several meanings to several people, depends upon how people perceive money. So it becomes a symbol, it becomes an archetype wherein people view this particular thing from their own aspect. Okay, the next one is the patriarchal existence, as I spoke about this in earlier one of my slides as well. Now, and I have explained the Indian societal conditions wherein women is expected to be at home and serve to her marriage thing. The next archetype is education. Now, education, uh, for some it is a hard earned thing. For somebody it's a money giving thing. So for someone it's learning, for someone it's earning. Greed, privatization, power. Education can be used as a powerful approach as well. It can be used to corrupt, because when you educate yourself about the rules and regulation, you can twist and turn them and use as per your convenience. So that's corruption again, demoralizing, etc. So education is also one of the archetypes that we speak about recently. So we come to the next book, and I have chosen Jasmine by Bharti Mukherjee, published in 1989 for my study. Now, Jyoti is a repressed character, in a conservative Indian family, and now she was rather a silent force, and you could tell that she was bursting at the seams with ambition and desire. She is a very bright person, and she is held back by her cultural values, still found, but she still manages to find a way to do little things differently than everybody else. Now, she wanted to become something more than just a housewife. Maybe she was kind of an ambitious person, and she stood up to her ambitions as well. The difference in demeanor is what I believe led to her transition into Jasmine, the vibrant and adventurous lady, city housed woman who married the man that she wanted to marry. Jasmine lived a happy life with her husband Prakash, and while their life wasn't exactly the easiest, she sure seemed to enjoy it. I think that Prakash, a forward thinking person who didn't always want to follow the rules, really intrigued Jyoti, and thus she became very similar to her husband, a very friendly person to her husband. But suddenly, Prakash dies, and then there is a grueling journey to America. Jasmine met Lillian Gordon, who called her Jazzy. So now Jyoti becomes Jasmine, and Jasmine becomes Jazzy. Now, Jazzy is actually in her traditional period of her life, but obviously, not to everything was laid out on her yellow brick road, but she picked herself up from the mourning of Prakash's tragic death and enduring the half faces disgusting action wherein she was raped, and she moved forward. Now Lillian was a part of this transition though, and she had already much to her experience, like lot many things were coming up. Then Jasmine moves with Professor G and didn't really have much of an identity. She was just a widow who was working in someone else's home, almost a fly on the wall. She didn't have much of a purpose there, and her lack of name was absolutely symbolic here again. Now, the change of the name is symbolic here in this particular book. Jyoti in an Indian context becomes Jasmine, say somewhere a transitive approach towards the character. Then Jazzy, the Western effect, the Western fervor takes her over, and then ultimately she becomes a Jays. Once Jasmine moved out of Professor G's home, she moved in with Taylor, Wiley, and Duff and becomes their caretaker. Jays was closest Jasmine ever came to being Jasmine. She was extremely happy and was arguably more successful financially. And then she was there as she was financially better off when she was with Prakash. So now Jays was able to make her own living and do what she wanted. So now the gradual development of the character takes over, the growth of the person, as in Alice Walker's The Color Purple. The growth of the character takes growth of Sally is tremendous in The Color Purple. The way Sally grows, the way Jyoti grows are almost the similar things. Like she is in a diasporic context, but therein Sally is an African context. She is dominated by slavery. Here, she is dominated by the death of her husband, the Indian cultural approaches. So, the kind of evolution these characters take, this is the archetype. This is the growth of the character becomes the archetype over here. Now, um, the tortures, the trauma, the problems that these characters endure, and they move ahead towards the end of becoming an endurer, a winner in the end, is ultimately the archetype that I want to highlight over here. Now, the societal paradigms that I'm talking about, the symbolic approaches. Now, whenever a girl in an Indian context has a scar on her face, say maybe on her forehead, as Jasmine had a star-shaped scar on her forehead, which she names as the third eye. As in Indian mythological approach, Lord Shiva had the third eye, and whenever this eye used to open, there was a disaster all over the you can say the globe, or maybe the entire solar system, and things like that. But the third eye had tremendous significance in has tremendous significance in Indian mythology. Jasmine has a scar on her forehead, a star-shaped scar. Now, in Indian system, whenever if the girl is ready for marriage and she happens to have an accident, the first approach or the first thought that comes in her parents or anybody close to her uh, in their minds, that how will she get married because of this ugly scar on her face. So she won't be able to get married, as in this book also, in Jasmine also, we hear one of the characters speaking like this. Now, the cracked jug, whenever something breaks down, now it becomes a waste, a futile thing. So the cracked jug is again a motive. Astrology, wherein we speak about a bleeding star, what in India we believe that whenever there is a bleeding star, the marriages cannot happen, and after that there is a period in an year wherein the marriages don't happen because of the star that bled. So the bad times, it's an ill omen for the bad times. So the bleeding star is again an analogy for something bad, for bad times rather. The next thing is technology has multiple meanings for everybody. For me, technology is a blessing, and for you it may be just a wastage of time. Or rather, when we are talking, say, in the education scenario, as for now, given to COVID times, the we can connect with anybody across the world, wherever you are sitting, and we are exposed to an ocean of knowledge. But for education thing, in our books, in our literature, it has different meanings. Here for Jasmine, it is something that she gains with a lot of effort, something that she toils for, something that she has worked hard for. But education, again, can mean so many things to so many people, as I have spoken about it earlier. Now the fakir, the saint, the ashram, these things also have a symbolic meaning. When we talk about these things, certain things about when we talked about those seven qualities, which Carl Jung said that one of the quality dominates the particular personality, he kind of he turns into that particular person. If I am, my kingly qualities dominate, I become a king. So whatever. Now, whenever we see these kind of approaches coming in a book, say fakir, or they are associated to a prediction. You can call it, say, something that is going to happen in near future. So these are the societal paradigms that I'm talking about. Now let's sum up the entire thing. When we talk about, again, those traits which Carl Jung said, the motives, the archetypes that we use, there are certain, there's a pattern, these motives give us a pattern to think about. These motives give us a, you can say, an approach, a direction to our thinking. Whenever there is a kind person or a revengeful person, Macbeth, the characters say it all. In Shakespeare, lots of books, the characters are dominated by any one of these particular approaches, and then you can decide that this factor in this particular character, again, is the archetypal thing: morality, religion, and bravery. So many things dominating the characters, and these become the archetypal approach and the study system. Now there are colorful pictures on my screen. Now these are again symbolic gestures, symbolic things these say so many things, Abhi. Whenever we have to celebrate Eid throughout the world, we hug each other, and then we say Eid Mubarak. And these are archetypal gestures that we go about. For the Diwali thing in India, we light up diyas. We just put them in rows outside the houses, inside the houses, to just enlighten up everything, because the entire Ayodhya was lit up with diyas when Ram, Sita, and Lakshmana they were coming from the exile. This is a pic from Basant Panchami. These women are wearing yellow. Yellow, the color becomes symbolic again. You are supposed to wear a yellow on Basant Panchami in India. So the dress, the color, the dances, the celebrations, even the hug, even the approach, the way we wish each other on particular festival, these things again become the archetype, and again they show a lot. In India, we celebrate Holi, so it is a lot many colors. We use a lot of colors on our faces and all that stuff. We color each other and exchange smiles and laughter. So these things are again symbolic, and they speak volumes about the archetypal approach in literature as well as in our real life. I appreciate your patience. Thank you. And I come to an end with my presentation with these two messages on my screen by Maya Angelou and Nelson Mandela. Thank you a lot for joining me, and thanks to the organizers for having me as a presenter.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Buta. So that's an amazing presentation. Personally, Mom, I learned a lot about Indian literature because you shared it a while ago. So
Thank you.
again, thanks for enlightening us with your pearls of wisdom and story. Thank you for your contribution and thank you for your precious time from your Choco Black timetable, and your knowledge will be effective to our audience because you shared your insight. No doubt, our viewers will be benefited today by the awareness they received through your technique. Once again, Mom, thank you so much, and we will
Thank
be
you. Thank
back
you.
during the Q&A.
Certainly.
Okay, Mom. Okay, dear viewers, let me remind you again, don't forget to share, tag, comment, and mention your friends in the comment box because your attachment encourages us to do better and best service to our lovely audience. Our mission is to empower our youth to stay with us by your support. Okay, before moving on to our next speaker, please support us again by sharing, tagging, and commenting in our webinar session. And don't forget to celebrate at IGP by checking in and recommending IGP to your friends and community once you received your digital certificate. Let's explore together, learn, and grow with IGP's reminder: feed your skills, innovate, inspire, and impact. So at this juncture, let's welcome our second speaker, Dr. Sitra from Bhutan.
Yeah, thank you, IGP, and thanks to Juliet, the resource person for today's session. I'm glad to join this platform as a speaker. Let me introduce myself. I am Chitra, serving as program leader and assistant professor for Masters in English program in Enfula Centenary College, Royal University of Bhutan. I hold 2 decades of teaching experience in humanities, English literature and language, with research projects and publications to my credit. I have research projects in Bhutanese folklore studies and also action research projects in faculty attrition, English language proficiency of students, and the teaching learning that happened during the pandemic. And my publication range extensively on various topics from different areas of interest, including women and gender studies, post-colonial studies, contemporary literature, and pandemic and disease studies, tribal and folklore, culture studies mainly. I have participated in many number of 80 plus conferences, number of conferences and workshops for online academic workshops and in webinars, and also as keynote speaker in international conferences of varied topics and themes. With this brief introduction, let me share my screen and move on to my topic. I do request the resource person to post me the time if I exceed.
Okay, Bang, please present now
Okay.
your screen.
In connection with the previous speaker who talked about psychoanalysis, I have titled my talk to share some insights to the international participants of this platform on research trends in English studies. What kind of trends are coming up in English studies? And this is in connection with interdisciplinarity as a new approach and an ongoing research trend in English studies. It is ever expanding, and many more topics in association with English studies are coming into existence. Some are from the center, the domain of the center. Some are moving from the center to place it peripheries and creating a connection between the center and the peripheral topics. That's what I want to explore today. Some of the emerging domains in literary research. Let me walk you through the normal things that we do in literary research in humanities pertaining to English literary studies. It began with thematic study of plays or novels by analyzing the role of characters. And when we analyze the characters, we look into the gender dimension of the characters, the psychological dimension of the characters. Elaine Showalter and her 3 phases of feminism or gynocriticism can be applied to study the text. Phallocentrism and patriarchy can be the lens to study some of the characters and their development and the struggles they go through and the themes that the novelists talk about in different literary spaces, be it Indian English or world literature. Then we talk about three phases of feminism. And when it comes to psychoanalysis, Freud's psychoanalysis of id, ego, and superego, which Dr. Viba began her presentation with, and also Lacan's three roles, imaginary, symbolic, and real order, three different orders of psyche. These are some of the dimensions. And then the study moved on to new historicism of Stephen Greenblatt, applying that as a lens to study the characters and the themes of the novels, historical novels and historical genre, the relation between old historicism and new historicism. And then it moved further to include gender dimension from a different lens. Though it began with Elaine Showalter, Simon G. Beauer's The Second Sex, a woman is not born but becomes. So such statements added insights to study the literary text. Then it further moved on in the contemporary times towards gender trouble by applying Judith Butler's approach, performative analysis and performativity of gender, in her book titled Gender Trouble. These are some of the dimensions that literary studies had been engaging with for times immemorial, and especially in the 20th century, by concentrating on intertextual elements that are present in the text, with focus on socio-cultural, historical, and political dimension. And tribal and folk literature also gained popularity, and post-colonial studies in Indian literature and in the forms of India and from other countries, post-colonial studies became popular. That also further gave rise to Dalit literature and biographies. Now, interdisciplinary approach is taking us beyond and outside the discipline to connect us with multifold approach and multidimensional aspects and multidisciplinary approaches. Culture studies in 1960s emerged as a field of study in itself. That became a field of inquiry. Raymond Williams and Richard Hogarth's principles and the difference between high art and low art, high culture and low culture, that occupied the importance of research. Then when we talk about tribal, subaltern studies about the marginalized, when we talk about Dalit, this subaltern lens came to be used. Gayatri Chakrabarti's Spivak's essay, Can the Subaltern Speak?, added insight to subaltern studies, and Deepesh Chakrabarti's arguments gave a lot of insights and insights into the marginalized, the voiced, and the voiceless. Then gender studies took another dimension with Judith Butler, and it became queer and transgender studies. It is not only masculine and feminine, there is a third gender. The transgender studies talked about queerness, and that's how the gender dimension and homosexuality questioned the heteronormativity of characters. For instance, in plays like Mahesh Dattani's plays and Dance Like a Man is one example. Then green studies came into existence in 1980s that added a new dimension to literary studies with Gerald Gladfelty's seminal work on eco-criticism Reader, a landmark of literary ecology that shows the relation between man and nature, between literature and environment. That's how environmental humanities is booming now, with focus on ecofeminism and ecological aspects. There are different other humanities that emerged, such as digital humanities, then disability studies to talk about abled and disabled bodies, performance studies and performativity as an enactment, and gender as a performative act. Then trauma studies that talk about the culture shock and the PSTD, post-traumatic symptoms. memory studies came into is now currently ruling the research in the literary field that talks not only about personal memory but also about collective memory, where Freud and Lacan's theory and Carl Jung's theory of collective unconscious can be applicable to study the text. Then food studies is also gaining attention along with oil narratives, where energy humanities and energy studies becomes another field of approach. Here in this talk, I would like to connect three emerging disciplines. One is medical humanities and health humanities. I would like to connect the underlying ideas of these two emerging areas with pandemic studies, because it is relevant today to talk about pandemic studies in the COVID-19 scenario. Excuse me. Yeah, when I talk about this particular aspect of medical humanities and health humanities, I see them as discourses of human condition. That's what they mainly talk about. Yes, what is this medical humanities all about? It is dominated by EBM, evidence-based medicine, and also analytical approaches that is based on data generated from quantitative method, then problem-solving approaches with students, medical students especially, spending their efforts and their energy to diagnose the disease and also to find a remedy, the correct medicine and the correct approach to cure the disease. This is how it has been going on, but failing. What is missing here is they are also failing to reflect on deeper questions, and these deeper questions with regard to their role as healthcare professionals. The essentials of healthcare instincts are completely left behind. And this becomes a danger to the field of, in the practice of medicine, it is creating a danger by losing touch with humanity in the practice of real. Therefore, this discipline, medical humanities, wanted to make medical students to be interested in the patients as a whole. When they look at the patients, they should be interested in the patient as a whole, not just in the symptoms alone. They should be interested in the people than in the diseases alone. This helps medical humanities to provide insights into human condition along with insights into illness and suffering, perspectives about oneself, as well as professionalism. It also gives importance to professionalism and responsibility to self and others, to colleagues and patients. What is the role of literature here? One thing that brings medicine and humanities together is the focus on humans, because humanities share with medicine this particular idea of focusing on humans. What is the role of literature here? Introducing medical students to literature will help them gain increased awareness through narratives of illness and through images of disease and death commonly present in literature. They can gain awareness about empathy and associative as well as a holistic dimension of dealing with people who come to them as their patients to be treated. Here, effect that they need to show to the patients by treating them as the people and to look at the patients as whole, not in part. It also induces in them exposure to literature, also induces in them development of observational skills and different types of reasoning. Though medical students and medical professionals are trained in clinical reasoning, they also require analytical reasoning and non-analytical strategies of reasoning at times. Literary text and exposure to art and literature can train them in these areas, inducing such developments in them to look at the nature and the source of human emotions, which literature talks about, and also about the behavior, not only about emotions, but also about behavior. And the narrative, illness narratives contain all these elements, which increases the empathy and self-reflection of the medical students and the medical professionals. Another interesting commonality that these two disciplines share could be the narrative method. In literature, we talk about illness narratives. In medicine, too, there is a narrative method which is widely applied in medicine. For instance, patients tell their stories to their doctors, who share such stories with their colleagues, either by presenting or discussing the case of the patients, and they face patient as a text that needs interpretation. In this sense, literary studies can enhance the effective performance in the narrative aspects of medicine. It can enhance the performance with ethical teaching points adding vitality to the professionals. And if we look at the wealth of literature, there had been books of illness are found in novels, and there are also images of physicians who live as characters in literary text. Apart from this, there is also a wealth of literature that has physician writers such as Francois Rabelais, John Keats, Arthur Conan Doyle, Anton Chekhov, and Walker Percy, and many more. Then this kind of writing could be helpful for them. As well as another thing could be medical biographies are important too. These are important since they could offer a glimpse into the lives of the physicians. And this can be inspiring for the readers. The recognition of human nature in those biographied physicians with their values, showing and highlighting their values and deficiencies, could be didactic in its effort to humanize the medical practice, and also it can equip the future physicians to face moral challenges by reading such medical biographies of the physicians themselves, who share their experiences of both their values and their deficiencies. In total, they talk about their human nature. In this perspective, there is a lot of research prospect for literary students to take up research in medical humanities. Though the field is dominated and meant for the medical students, it is concerned with training the medical students in medical practice with ethics and with empathy. It can also help the literary researchers to approach certain text about illness narratives with a new dimension and from a new framework. As a research field and as a field of inquiry, it can also look into some of the inequalities and complexities in terms of health, well-being, disease and illness, and also the social disease that is created due to inequalities and complexities. From many different dimensions can be applied to study the text. From the social, cultural, ethical, philosophical, and socio-linguistic dimensions, these illness narratives can be studied for sociology of diagnosis, for cultural perception on health and illness, which varies, and philosophy of medicine and ethics can be another area of interest that can be researched upon. Then, being a theoretically informed qualitative method, doctor-patient interaction, their role, communication, uncertainty, and the shared decision making between doctors and patients when it comes to treatment and many sittings. How do they uh, decide on such things on a shared basis, depending on the reports and the health cases, can be of certain interesting research areas and research dimensions. Let me move on to connect it with health humanities. When it comes to medical humanities and health humanities, what do they have in common? They aim to understand the aspects of human condition. Both of them both these humanities aim to understand aspects of human condition in relation to health and medicine. And they utilize humanities knowledge to improve the medical practice and to improve the medical care. Whereas how health humanities differ from medical humanities, though they share certain aspects such as human condition and such as utilizing humanities knowledge to improve medical practice. At the same time, health humanities tries to create a link between health and social care discipline and art and literature. It links the health and the social care discipline with art and literature by its capacious approach to understand human health in cultural terms, ethical terms, religious terms across human history. Here, if we take the example of COVID-19, from health humanities perspective, COVID-19 is more than a biomedical phenomenon. Though it is a medical and public health event, it is also a cultural and a moral event. That's how it can be looked at. Take, for instance, the practice of wearing which had become the flashlight. This flashpoint works in two dimensions. On the one hand, yes, it is to protect the health of the community in order to save the community from the spread of the virus. That is the main aspect of wearing face mask, and that was the flashpoint. Another political fault line it also became the reason for one another political fault line. I can put it this way. What is this political fault line? Some started seeing the mandate of wearing the face mask as an infringement upon personal freedom. Okay, why? Why many resist and refuse to wear face mask? Here arises the question, what political and cultural histories fuel their claims on or claims about personal independence? That's the reason given. It's an infringement upon personal freedom. Here arises the question, carefully listen to the question. What political and cultural histories fuel their claims about personal freedom and it is a sort of distrust on public health officials. So what fuels it? And one other question could be, what happens when individual health or public health come into conflict with other values such as freedom? Answer to such questions are often more historical and cultural than simply being medical. This is where health humanities play a vital role to take up such issues, to research them about from the dimension of political history, political fault lines, and from cultural history rather than from medical perception. This is one area I would like to bring it to the notice of the participants. And this is the connection that prevail between medical humanities and health humanities. That is an upcoming research area. And from here, I would like to move on to pandemic studies, which is also about human condition. And here I would like to explain few things in relation to epidemic narratives. And this is an explanatory framework with which I would like to move ahead. Let me begin with Shakespearean phrase, which Shakespeare used to describe Hamlet's condition, that time is out of joint. This is what indicates our predicament too, since 2019 through 2020, and now once again the variant of Omicron in 2021, that time is out of joint indicates the COVID ambivalence in which we are pulling through. Arundhati Roy's essay titled Pandemic is a Portal discusses how it describes the term gone viral, how the term gone viral, which we casually used a few years back, how this term gone viral has been transmogrified into a traumatic virulence that describes the culture of pandemonium, of chaotic change and disorder when things fall apart. It has resulted in things falling apart and leaving us in the midst of a fractured reality and a disrupted sociality. Here I would like to apply the framework of an American medical historian, Charles E. Rosenberg. He has interestingly used a framework not for pandemic in his with reference to AIDS. In 1989, he talked about this particular framework, which is dramatized as 4 acts. Any kind of epidemics, such as AIDS, that's the example he has taken, is dramatized by him as a play in 4 acts. And this perfectly fits the pandemic COVID-19 scenario. These are the 4 acts. Let me quickly take you through them. Act 1, he calls it as progress. When there is a revelation about COVID-19 virus, there had been a reluctance, a greater reluctance among the ordinary men and women with their complacency, and among merchants, politicians, municipal authorities. Everyone refused to believe in what it is, thinking that it will not affect us. They refused to follow the protocols of COVID-19 with a certain reluctance, and there had been an initial denial in accepting the reality. This is called the revelation, which happened in a gradual process. Everyone was reluctant to acknowledge the seriousness of the outbreak because of its threat to their economic interest, institutional interest, and to their accustomed and habitual way of life. It restricts that. Gradually, however, when the symptoms of morbidity gets enacted by the increasing number of active cases and also resulting in death, there had been a recognition, ultimate recognition, though with a certain unwillingness. This phase with initial denial is the first phase that has led to progressive revelation about the outbreak of the disease. Then the second act, titled as Managing Randomness, talks about the collective agreement to manage the crisis. In the previous centuries, this collective agreement was attributed to religion, but now it is more secular and also moral and social. Historically, in the times of plague, there had been a causal relation between plague and sin, saying that it is a punishment inflicted by God for the moral depravity of the individuals and for the society. However, Greek historian Thucydides, in his book History of Peloponnesian War denied this, and he removed the supernatural beliefs. But within this moral and social framework, let me introduce the latest work by Susan Sontag's book published in 1978 titled Illness as Metaphor. And this discusses how people perceived cancer and tuberculosis in the 1970s and 80s. Not only disease was a stigma, but also the sufferers of the disease were stigmatized because it is their habit that has caused this ailment. That's why the cancer patients and the tuberculosis patients were stigmatized for their disease. They were the victims, but the victims themselves are responsible for their ailment, was the argument. Then, in the companion piece titled AIDS and Its Metaphors, same author, Susan Sontag, extends the metaphors applied to cancer to that of AIDS to show that disease also carries a moral and a social stigma. And COVID-19 pandemic is not an exception. It is not an exception. It also suffered such stigmas. Wuhan virus from the land of yellow people, and so many geography of disease was created, and that talks about the social criticism. Then in Act 3, called Negotiating Public Response, we can see how pressure is generated for decisive and visible community response, taking the form of collective rights, integrating both cognitive and emotional elements, such as clapping hands to appreciate the sacrifice of frontline workers, lighting lamps, and promotional videos to get vaccinated. So this kind of decisive and visible community response took the form of collective rights to negotiate the public response collectively. And from the biomedical side, there was the imposition of quarantine and procedures to cleanse and disinfect. Other than that, there was also moral and social rituals that promised efficacy during this phase, which also relates with pandemic. So all these four acts are described by Charles E. Rosenberg with reference to epidemics such as AIDS. But this has a close relation with the pandemic crisis too. This is one such framework that can be commonly used to study illness narratives or about epidemic narratives exclusively. Then it leads to Act 4 about subsidence or retrospection. Though subsidence is not in sight so far, there is an inclination toward decline. We are hoping that this virus might end, this pandemic might end, this pandemonium, culture of pandemonium might come to an end, though the end seemed to be far away. And already there are retrospective moral judgment about the lessons learned, and there are so many questions circulating. Have the dead died in vain? If we try to go back to the normal instead of following the new normal, if we try to throw away all the pandemic COVID-19 restrictions to the wind, and if we go back to the normal, is that a plausible option? No. This kind of moral retrospective questions are already in sight, and they are already being asked. What are the lessons that we have learned, and how the new normal will be different? This is an explanatory framework to study epidemic narratives. And from here, I move on to the narrative structure. Any novel that is about epidemic, for example, Albert Camus' The Plague, or Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, such novels, Ahmed Ali's Twilight in Delhi, or U.R. Ananthamurthy's Samskara. In some novels, the plague will be in the central event. It would be the central event, and some it would be in the backdrop. But still, such epidemic narratives about Spanish flu, which broke out in 1918-19, are already available, though full-fledged novels and memoirs about pandemic narratives are awaited. How to study this epidemic narrative in terms of research? It has a threefold structure. It talks about outbreak. Obviously, outbreak will be there, and outbreak will result in socio-cultural crisis, and there will be a resolution in the end. That is captured by Rosenberg in this quote unquote, epidemics start at a moment in time. Then it proceeds on a stage which is limited in space and duration, meaning it has a beginning and an end. Then it follows a plot line of increasing and revelatory tension. There is an increasing tension, but the tension also reveals and registers certain lessons in the human history. Then it moves to a crisis of individual patients, or it can be the crisis of the collective community. Then it has to end. It will drift toward the closure, is the explanation about this epidemic narrative. Here, when studying such narratives, a conceptual distinction can be applied. These narratives from literary perspective cannot be studied from biomedical point of view. Even medical humanities, humanities and health humanities do talk about human condition. Therefore, it is not bringing the biomedical aspects or epidemiological account of the patients with a set of objective facts only about the rate of morbidity, about the therapeutic and prophylactic intervention or objectivity. It is not so. That is left to biomedical science and biomedical narrative, where the subjective experience of the patients and the COVID patients and the sufferers will be very minimal or nil. And the emphasis of biomedical narratives will be to cure the body. The focus will be on the disease, its symptoms, and on the body. Whereas literary text, like medical and health humanities, take the human condition into account from a cultural perspective. It focuses on the subjective experiences of the patients, of the sufferers, their illness experiences, their perceptions and values of the society during those times, what kind of cultural trauma that they have faced. Because cultural parameters cannot be exempted when we study the subjective experiences of the sufferers. It can be the COVID sufferers, or it can be any epidemic sufferer, AIDS patient. It could be the Spanish flu survivors, and what kind of experiences do they register and have they undergone. That is what the literary text from cultural lens and as a cultural narrative would like to unfold. And here the focus will be on the axiological crisis, the kind of clash that two different groups based on caste or religion or race, what kind of crisis the communities or the societies faced. So that would be the import of these texts from the social events and from the cultural parameters, with an emphasis on the subjective experience of the sufferer, and as well as cultural narratives focus will be on healing, not curing. From this subjective experience, it would like to address not only the healing of the physical body and its pain and suffering, but also the healing of the mind, the acute emotional crisis that the patients, the sufferers have undergone, which has resulted in a trauma during the period of suffering. That would be the focus. Here I would like to make a point about the difference between illness and disease. Disease is something to do with organs. It can be an infection, it can be an injury that will be treated by doctors, and the treatment is only for the body, for its recovery. Whereas illness talks about the feelings. It could be pain, distress, disease, discomfort. From there, it can be something emotional also. And this takes into account not just the body, but also the mind. There are some non-physiological aspects that will be taken into account. That's the basic difference between disease and illness. And most of the illness narratives talk about the human emotions and the human condition. So the notion of cultural crisis can be twofold. On the one hand, it could be about the existential crisis of the survivors, and on the other hand, it could be about the axiological or value crisis of the community and of the society itself. If we take Alvin Toffler's book published in 1970, the title itself is Future Shock. And according to Alvin Toffler, today the world itself is in the grip of future shock, exhibiting the psychological angst of individuals and society. And this condition change happening in too short a period of time. And that is what pandemic has done to us. It has installed a fear psychosis in human beings, in the psyche of human beings, which is accompanied by anxiety. There is suspicion and paranoia. And this catastrophe is not just a medical crisis or a biological condition, but it is not just caused by the invisible deadly pathogen, but also a cultural trauma that has created pathologies of fear with perceptible change in the social behavior and in the interaction among people. That is what this kind of narratives would be looking into. And this particular moment makes us look at this unexpected crisis, which we didn't think of, such emergence, unexpected emergence of such infectious diseases. Because in the early 20th century, when the virology research was just beginning and taking shape, the infectious diseases were common. But in the second half of the 20th century, the world was very confident. There was an assurance that such infectious diseases will not harm the society because of the improvements in virology research. But this has become a false assurance now. We are caught unaware with the unexpected emergence of such infectious diseases that constitutes actually the critical moment of truth, forcing societies to represent themselves to themselves. Let me repeat, forcing this kind of unexpected moments are the critical moments of truth, forcing societies to represent themselves to themselves, not to others, but to ourselves, as Durkheim might have phrased it, in forms of cultural specificity and historical singularity, because the cultural parameters and the response largely differ from society to society. Hope I'm on time. From here, let me move on to the role of literature. Really, in such epidemic narratives, what is the role of literature? If we take the early 20th century literature, like any other trauma, for instance, it could be World War. Literature has recorded the experiences of such traumas. It could be World War, Holocaust, or partition. Like that, the trauma of pandemic will soon be narrativized and historicized. When we talk about trauma, Carrie Carruth is the trauma theorist. But here I would like to mention the French psychiatrist Pierre Janet, who said, traumatic memory must be turned into narrative memory. And these illness narratives can make an appeal to our human sensibilities. Though it can be tragic, offering shocking accounts of crisis, cruelty, violence, and trauma, it can also be redemptive, on the other hand, with accounts of courage, of a tribute to COVID warriors, perhaps, and it can be a resilient account of COVID survivors. What is their fight against disease? What kind of fight they have put in, how resilient they had been in overcoming the crisis and surviving the pandemic. Therefore, it could be either tales of travails or triumphs. Here, if we take a look into the history, back into history, we find the great Spanish influenza pandemic of 1918 to 19, which coincided with the armistice of First World War. And here the question arises, has it had any impact on literature? Because Spanish flu coincided with World War I. Therefore, what is the impact of Spanish flu on culture? In fact, there is omission and there is silence in the cultural text, and that remains as a mystery. Why Spanish flu is not represented in the cultural text as a memory of an event or as the memory of modernity. There was a cultural amnesia and a cultural silence surrounding this Spanish flu influenza pandemic of 1918. Here, the central question arises, was early 20th century, which is termed as modernism in literary history, could it be seen as viral modernism? Here I would like to refer to Elizabeth Outcast's latest book titled Viral Modernism, the Influenza Pandemic and Interwar Literature, appropriately published in 2020, that shows the modernist movement in art and literature, which itself is an offshoot of the First World War, as a modernism that has been triggered by a pandemic. So the modernism could also be a viral modernism, is the argument of Elizabeth Outcast in this book. And she considers the early 20th century literature as an imaginative expression of viral modernism. But what could be the reasons for the muteness of this pandemic influenza in the literary text? Why there is a cultural silence and a cultural amnesia around this representation of influenza pandemic in literary text? The reasons could be the tragic intensity of war and its dramatic appeal towards heroism and valor is celebrated than the assault of invisible flu virus on human bodies. That was considered less heroic and less dynamic, and thus Spanish influenza pandemic and its representation in literature became a forgotten pandemic. I would like to look into the late modernist writings. Yet a decade later, in 1930s, perhaps Spanish influenza pandemic, and that was by John O'Hara, Catherine Ann Porter, and William Maxwell. Porter, who is a Spanish influenza pandemic survivor herself, did revisit the memories of that outbreak in her fiction only 15 to 20 years later. Only in 1939, she was afflicted by a pandemic in 1919, but she didn't have the courage to revisit that memory. There, she required the elapse of time. The lapse of time is one of the reasons to bring the narrativized memory of pandemic in writings as a full-fledged novel or a memoir. These are some of the examples which shows that it took a longer time, a decade, more than a decade, for the survivors to gather their experiences and their courage to narrate that experience through their fictional character. Catherine Ann Porter creates the character Miranda, and it becomes a semi-autobiographical novel to talk about the pandemic experiences and the illness experience, especially how she suffered. So this here also there could be the application of metaphor, because the modernist writers metaphorized the afflicted body for the modernity itself. The condition of modernity, to represent the condition of modernity, they metaphorized the afflicted body. The writers tried to show the disease-ridden bodies of characters as completely broken and fragmented, both by the pressure of external condition as well as by their personal loss and suffering and grief. As a result, here the modern body gets disembodied, and the characters occupy the interstice, the liminal space between life and death, and that gets reenacted actually in this 21st century during COVID times, despite the advancements in virology research, and the scope for new writings is in the hands of time. As I told you, and as I have given example from early modernist phase, it took time for writers to record their experiences in literature. Therefore, COVID survivors and pandemic trauma also will be narrativized and historicized with a lapse of time. I would like to take 3 more minutes to talk about disability studies also as another research prospect in connection with the human condition that these different humanities do talk about. And when it comes to disability studies, that also tries to project the body and the normative construct of identities and body. The fundamental purpose of this study is to deconstruct that normative label that defines how a person is defined, and who defines him. These are some of the fundamental questions which disability studies try to deconstruct. And it is challenging the essentialized construction of identities from these modes and using few models that also has medical model. Therefore, I'm talking from biomedical sciences perspective in connection with medical humanities. It could be a medical model, but it also could be a social model as well as political model. And the new model is the interactionist model, where the interaction is between individuals and the social environments. Who defines and how they are defined, and how identities are constructed. Also, this discipline looks at the barriers when it comes to abled bodies and disabled bodies, how they are differentiated. What is the definition for normative and normal body? These are some of the arguments that prevail in this discipline. Along with the models, there are also barriers that can be used to look into the models, such as social barriers that is not friendly. Actually, I can say it is not very friendly for disabled people to move around. There are many social barriers, and there are also attitudinal barriers and infrastructural barriers that is not friendly for the disabled people to compete with others and to move in the society along with everyone. The arguments are what is normal and what is disabled, able and disabled, differently abled. These terms are contested. Now let me draw to a conclusion from all these point of view that I presented about the recent trends in English studies. I could conclude by means of research. Though we can talk about illness, health, well-being, and disease, from illness to wellness is what our society is moving, and its literature is all about. If I talk about Indian society, I stands for illness. I is the Western model, individualism. Whereas in our societies, in the case of ancient societies like Indian society, we are very collective. There is a collective response to face the crisis. Therefore, it is not I or individualism that matters, we matters. Therefore, from all these crises, let us move from illness to wellness is the positive note with which I would like to conclude, by also adding a point in terms of research that we are also moving from discipline specific. In academia, we are moving from discipline specific interest to interdisciplinary interest. That is what health humanities is setting in favor of, because it is in dialogue with all the other disciplines such as digital humanities, environmental, disability studies. It has correspondence with queer and transgender studies and also critical race studies, because it talks about health across human history from cultural, ethical, gender, and religious dimensions. That could be one example to show our movement in academia from discipline to interdiscipline. For thank you. Hope my presentation and insights has added intellectual enrichment to the participants of this international platform. Thank you for the opportunity. Here I stop.
Okay, thank you so much, Mom, for that very interesting topic. And I hope and I'm sure the viewers really learned a lot from you because your topic is very interesting and it is also very well explained by yours. Okay, so as of the moment, again, Mom, thank you so much for that very amazing presentation. And we are very happy that you shared your valuable time with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very
So
much.
we will be back during the Q&A. So at this moment, my dear viewers, we will be having our our quiz competition. Okay. To our viewers all over the world, I am encouraging you to participate our quiz competition because you can have your e-certificate or a completion certificate if you are going to have in the top 10. So please log in to www.slido.com with a code all capital letter IGP quiz or just click the link given in the comment box. So these are the different participants for this live quiz. So we have Dennis Ginto Serso, Igor Agabalayeva, Ana Marie Joy A. Mercado, Lisel A. Gabaldon, Feruz Akbarub, Saima Sabra, Rochelle Fabiano, Marvek V. Clavicilia, Elias A. Austria, Jeffrey A. Salem, Romel Hernandez, Melanie Obedosa Mara, Corazon Quintana. We have Lamberto S. Pilatan Jr., Halbert Ligaspi, Romel John C. Aquino, Maria Fe Cuguera, Carmela B. Jain, Crispiniano D. Candido. Okay, again, everyone, please log in to www.slido.com and join with us with our live quiz with the code IGP quiz in the capital letter, or you can click the link directly in the comment box. Again, so these are the participants for this live quiz. We have Angelo Ray D. Okay, so these are the first question. The eco-criticism reader. Landmarks is in literary ecology is a seminal text within the field of eco-criticism. It was co-edited by Cheryl Gloff, Gloffelty and Blanc, A. Harold Fron, B. Michael B. P. Branch. Okay, so what will be the correct answer for this question? Okay, it's letter A, Harold Fromm. And 1% got the correct answer. Okay, who will be leading? Okay, Giancarlo A. Villanza leading for this question. Okay, the second question. Who essay discusses the term gone viral as creating a culture of pandemonium? Is it A. Amitav Ghosh or B. Arundhati Roy? Okay, what would the correct answer for this question is Arundhati Roy with 30% got the correct answer over 70%. Okay, again, leading for this question, Giancarlo A. Villanza. And the second is Dennis Ginto Cerso. Third is Romel Hernandez. Fourth is Elias A. Austria. Okay, the next question. In history, which outbreak is known as influenza pandemic? A. Swine flu or a Spanish flu? Okay, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. You only have 1 second left to answer. Okay, so the correct answer for this question is the Spanish flu with 75% got the correct answer. Okay, who will be leading in the leaderboard? Okay, the top one for this question is Romel Hernandez, followed by Elias A. Austria, and followed by Richelle Flaviano. Okay, the fourth question. Which writer is an influenza survivor? Is it A. Catherine Ann Porter or B. John O'Hara? Click your answers now because you only have 1 second left to answer. Okay. The correct answer for these is Catherine Ann Porter with 82% got the correct answer over 17%. Who will be leading in the leaderboard? Okay, it's Romel Hernandez and followed by Elias A. Austria. The fifth question. Future shock means too much change in too short a period of time. Is it true or false? Click your answer now. The correct answer for this question is true. Okay, leading is again Romel Hernandez, followed by Elias Austria, and the third is Cipriano Candido. The fourth is Meco Den Esmiro. Okay. The sixth question. Which novelist is chosen with 2 books? Is it A. Sudha Murthy or Sudha Chandran? The correct answer is Sudha Murthy. Leading is Romel Hernandez. And the second is Nico Den Miro. Third, okay, the seventh question. Who initiated psychoanalysis? Is it neurologist Sigmund Freud or Carl Jung, who initiated psychoanalysis? Click your answers now. The answer is neurologist Sigmund Freud, with 94% got the correct answer. And leading top one for this question is Neko Den Nero. Second is Feroz Akbarov, and the third is Romel Hernandez. Okay, the eighth question. Psychoanalysis is used to treat several liver conditions or mental conditions. What would be the correct answer for this question? And the answer is mental conditions. And 100% got the correct answer. And leading top one for this question is Feroz Akbarov, and the second is Elias Austria, and the third is Romel Hernandez. The ninth question. According to Jung, ego represents the conscious mind or the unconscious mind. The correct answer is conscious mind. And the top one for this question is Elias Austria. Second is Romel Hernandez. The third is Maria Angela Sidanza Gonzaga. Okay. Next question. Study of the archetype is classical story or current affairs. And the correct answer is classical story. And 84% got the correct answer. Congratulations to the top 10 winners of this quiz competition. We have the top one, Romel Hernandez. Top two is Maria. Okay, again, the top one for this live quiz competition is Romel Hernandez. Second is Maria Angela Sidanza Gonzaga. And the third is Elias A. Austria. They all got 9 over 10 points. The fourth one, we have Rochelle Fabiano. They just differ on the time. The fifth one, we have Evelyn P. Waperi. The sixth one, we have Zaima Zira. That's the top 6. Top 7, we have Min Kate Villanueva. Top 8, Romel John C. Aquino. Top 9, Nico Dan Ismiro. And top 10, we have Joel A. Bernazor. They all got 9 over 10. They just differ on the time. Okay, congratulations again to the top 10 winners of the live quiz competition. So at this moment, we will be having our Q&A portion after this video. Okay, my dear viewers, type now your questions in the comment box and please address to the speakers. Okay, welcome back, Dr. Bebabut and Dr. Chitra.
Thank you.
So again, my dear viewers, write now your questions in the comment box. Okay, so we will wait for the questions.
All right.
If you have, dear viewers, if you have some questions regarding the topic, please write down in the comment box. Okay, we will be waiting for the question. So just bear with us because we are experiencing our website is not working properly. So at this moment, let's wait. So I am happy to have these two intelligent speakers from India and Bhutan. We will be waiting for a moment.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay, thank you so much. And my dear viewers, do not forget to share, tag, and mention your friends in the comment box or share this in your newsfeed or in the community that you have because your sharing and tagging is very important to us. Please spread the news so that we will grow and grow together. Again, reminders, please tag your friends because every day we'll be having our live um, international webinar. And take note, you can have your e-certificate. And not only that, if you're going to join the quiz competition, you can also have a certificate if you got the top 10. And please continue to support with us. After getting your certificate, please do not forget to check in IGP and recommend IGP because your attachment is important so that we can also have our services. Okay, let me check the comments in the comment box. Just wait for a while because I'm going to check it using my phone. Since we are waiting for the questions, I'm going to check in our live in the Facebook page. Okay, so I'm going to read some of the comments in the comment section from Corazon A. Quintana. Thank you, speakers. Thank you, Mom, Dr. Viva Booth, and Dr. Cheetah. So another, we have here, let's have it here from, okay, from Rosalia S. Directo. Again, thank you so much to our great speakers. We also have from Joel of Bernasor. Thanks to be Thanks be to God, I able to recover despite serious internet problem. Okay, here is the first question. Okay, we have here. Thank you so much, great speakers from Rosalia S. Directo. Thank you, speakers from Corazon A. Quintana. Okay, so as of the moment, we don't have a questions from our viewers. So thank you so much for the
Thank you,
speakers
Juliet.
tonight. I think they really learned a lot from both of the speakers because no, see, we don't have the questions or they don't have any clarifications on the topics that you just have shared. Thank you so much again, Dr. Viva Booth and Dr. Shitra. We hope to hear you soon or maybe in the future to be the speaker again in IGP. Thank you so much for being with IGP and sharing your valuable time with us.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Juliet. Thank you,
thanks to
IGP.
IGP. Thanks to IGP,
Okay,
organizers
ma'am.
Juliet, and to Madam Dr. Vibabut. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you
Thank
again
you,
to
all the
both of you, ma'am.
participants, for the careful attention that they gave us. Thank you so much for appreciating. Thank you, IGP, once again, and see you soon. Take care. Stay safe. Bye bye.
Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you
Bye,
for
ma'am.
listening to us.
Bye.
Thank you for
Okay,
listening to us. Bye bye. Take care.
okay. Okay, my dear viewers all over the world, as of the moment, we are experiencing a technical problem. So the certificate code will be announced in a short while, or we will provide you the certificate code in a short time. Since we have experiencing a technical problem, please bear with us, and we will just announce, or the IGP will announce or share in a short while the certificate code. Again, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your great time with IGP. Okay, to all the knowledge seekers, thank you so much for attending this webinar and for your active participation. Hopefully, you learned something new. To the students who are with us, Please continue to seek knowledge to hone your skills and abilities. Please continue to support IGP. To all teachers and professors, I am hoping that our topic today adds more knowledge to you all. Remember, you can't give what you don't have. So learn more so you can give more and continue joining us in our future webinars. Please spread the information to your friends and community. Don't forget to collect e-certificate and check in IGP. We hope to see you all again next webinar.